Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Brittany and I do a lot of makeup content. In today's video, I want to share with you guys this cheap, affordable makeup brush kit that you can get, especially if you're a beginner just starting out. Makeup brushes are pricey, you guys, especially if you're trying to buy separate ones, but trying to find a good quality makeup brush kit can be a little challenging. But I'm going to share with you guys how I created this makeup look with only using 4 makeup brushes, you guys, and this applicator. So these brushes are from Real Techniques and it comes in this package that says Everyday Essential Brush Kit. The brush kit, y'all, is only $20. So I'm going to show you guys how I like to use them and how to create this makeup look. For my foundation, I like to use the Real Techniques Face Expert brush. When it comes to applying liquid foundation, you want to make sure you have a brush that is densely packed. And what I mean by that is you want a brush with bristles that are packed together tightly so that when you're using that brush to blend out your foundation, that foundation is staying on your face and not being absorbed into those bristles. So with densely packed brushes, because the bristles are packed together so tightly, majority of that liquid foundation will sit on the surface of that brush and not absorb into that brush. This will give you the best application, a very even application, and the best coverage. Of course, when it comes to coverage, whatever foundation you're using matters as well. And as far as application goes, I always spread a thin, even layer of my liquid foundation first, then blend the foundation out by using the brush to pat the liquid foundation into my skin until it disappears. I do prefer to use brushes over sponges because with the foundation brush, I always get the most coverage. Compared to a sponge, I get more of a natural sheer finish. All of Real Technique brushes are synthetic. They're also cruelty-free, cruelty and vegan-free, which is great. And the brushes also hardly sheds. The only time I really experience shedding from my brushes is when they're really old or when I'm washing them. I normally use my foundation brushes 3 to 4 times before washing them. If your brush bristles are clumped together or if they look stringy, it's time to wash them. You'll also be able to know when your brushes need to be cleaned by the way they feel on your face and when you run your fingers through them. The brush bristles just won't be as soft and fluffy as they were in the very beginning. If you think about it, you're mixing your old makeup with your new makeup, which leads to breakouts on your face. Also, bacteria can start to grow in your brushes. Bacteria, fungus, mildew, mold. There's just so many things that can happen from not washing your makeup brushes. So please get in the habit now, if you're a beginner, of washing your makeup brushes frequently whenever you're using them so you don't have to experience any of that. I can literally talk about the importance of clean makeup brushes all day, but we're going to move on to concealer. So this is the Real Technique setting brush. This brush is a small tapered brush, small and fluffy. It gives you that smooth airbrush look when you're blending out your concealer. And although this brush is technically a powder brush, I like using fluffier brushes to get a soft blend. The way I blend out my concealer is different from the way I blend out my foundation. For my foundation, I was trying to blend it into my skin so that it disappeared and looked like my skin. With the concealer, I want it to still sit on top. I want to blend out all of those harsh lines, but I also want to keep some of that color. I don't want to blend it out so much that it looks just like my foundation shade. So what I do is I lightly dust off that concealer using a very light hand. When I'm using this brush, I try to stick to just using one side of this brush because I like to use the other side for setting powder. Whenever I feel like my brush is getting stringy or clumpy from that concealer, I take a paper towel and wipe it off and keep going. So if you feel like you have too much product on the brush and the concealer is not really blending out, it's just sitting on your face, take a paper towel and wipe that brush off and try to re-blend that concealer out. The size of this brush is also great for getting into tight spots of your face. It's also great for applying your concealer on top of your eyelids to prep your eyelids for eyeshadow. The smaller the brush, the more control you have of the placement and where that concealer is going. So I do prefer to use smaller brushes. The smaller your brush is, the longer it'll take for you to blend it out. So that's something you want to keep in mind. But for me, it's definitely worth it because whenever I use a smaller brush, I always get the most flawless base. once I'm done blending out that concealer, I go in with that setting powder using the other side of that brush. I dust off the extra setting powder back into the container, and then I start to apply that setting powder underneath my eyes first. I like to start from my inner corners and press that setting powder all the way to my outer corners. So you always want to make sure you dust off the extra setting powder before applying that setting powder on your face. If you don't dust off the extra powder that's on the brush, when you apply that setting powder underneath your eyes, it will give you a very blotchy, uneven appearance. And I'm the most gentle when it comes to underneath my eyes because that's where I want the most coverage. If you're not gentle, it's easy for that concealer to move around, and it's easy for you to start to see that natural skin seeping through. Of course, it depends on what foundation you're wearing, what concealer you're using. If you use a thicker concealer, that might not be the case, but if you're using something much lighter, you want to be very gentle. Before you apply setting powder on top of that concealer, if you start to see creases underneath your eyes, you want to go back in and blend it out before applying that setting powder, because once you set that concealer in place, that is how it's going to look all day. So if you do have creases underneath your eyes, make sure you're blending it out before going in with that setting powder. Once I'm done setting my concealer, I go back to that foundation brush to soften up that look. So the setting powder looks a little harsh on my face. So I am just taking whatever is left on my foundation brush to blend out that setting powder a little better. The next brush I have here is the Real Techniques powder brush. This brush is big and fluffy and it's not densely packed, which is great for using loose powder to set your foundation. You don't want to use a densely packed brush to set the rest of your foundation because it's going to be more concentrated. You want it to be less concentrated. So I use that brush to set the rest of my foundation by sweeping that loose powder across my face. I take that same brush and I start to apply my bronzer. So I just take one side of the brush and I grab some of that bronzer and I pat it into my cheeks, keeping it in one area. I like using a fluffier brush with softer bristles because it softens up that bronzer look and I'm able to build it up instead of going straight in with bronzer and it already looks too dark. So I like to just gradually build it up with this brush. Once I'm done applying that bronzer, I like to wipe off any extra bronzer that I have on the brush, and I like to use the same brush for blush. When I'm using this brush for blush, I always use the tip of this brush and I apply the blush on top of my bronzer by lightly just sweeping it across my face as well until I get the color that I want. The next brush I'm using is the Deluxe Crease Brush. This brush is great for blending out contour lines on the nose. It is densely packed and it looks similar to my foundation brush. It's a smaller version of my foundation brush. The shape is a little different, but the bristles are pretty much the same. But what I do is I use only one side of the brush to blend out those harsh lines until I get rid of them. I go up and down and I blend those harsh lines into my eyelid just to create a very defined nose bridge. A small angled brush is much better for blending out nose contour, but you can still get the same results with this brush. You just have to know how to use it. So using this brush at an angle, making sure all the bristles are not touching that contour, you'll be able to blend that contour line to where it looks flawless. I also use this crease brush for eyeshadow. So one thing I will say is you don't want to go in with a super heavy hand like I just did. You can already see how uneven that eyeshadow is. When I got to my other eye, I started going in with a lighter hand, and you can definitely see the difference. But I use swiping motions to apply my eyeshadow, and to get rid of that harshness on my left eye, I go back in with my setting brush to soften that look. This part is optional, but I like to take my sponge now and apply a lighter setting powder on top of the other setting powder to give me a much brighter under eye. This is really the only time I use a sponge. Unless I want a very natural finish, I'll use a sponge more. I lightly press that setting powder into the other setting powder to set the concealer even more and also give me a very bright under eye. Once I have enough of that setting powder, I take my setting brush again to get rid of the lines on my nose. I just lightly dust off any of that extra setting powder, and I also press the setting powder in some more with that brush. And I use a little bit more highlighter, and I put some on my nose bridge and on my cheeks. I only added highlighter to my eyebrow arch because I wanted to apply that extra setting powder underneath my eyes. And you guys, I am barely touching my face with this brush. This highlighter gets very pigmented, and I didn't want something super pigmented. I just wanted something very subtle. And after that, you guys, that's the end. This is how the makeup look came out using those brushes. Very similar to majority of my makeup looks on my channel. I use different brushes in most of my videos. I just wanted you guys to see that you can still create a full glam makeup look. You don't need 32 brushes. It took me a while to build my brush collection. I have my favorites, but the application and the quality of the brushes is what matters the most. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I will have this kit in my description box, and of course, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave them down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, you guys.